and welcome to this webinar on driving digital transformation through social newsrooms. This is a webinar brought to you by WFA and Brilliant Noise, who we've worked with before. I'll shortly be introducing Anthony Mayfield. The first thing to say before we start is that yes, to preempt the question, yes, this presentation will be available to share post the webinar. We are also doing a recording which we will make available through our channel, so you will be able to pick it up that way as well. Now, you've come here today to hear from Anthony Mayfield. He's from Brilliant Noise. He's on the right there with a sort of a halo of trainers around his head there. I did think it would be useful just to share a few insights from WFA on this same topic. I'm Matt Green on the left there. Hopefully many of you will have heard from me before. I lead on digital marketing and media topics and practices at WFA. In the middle we have Natalia. You would have heard from her. She sent out the invite for this webinar. Natalia is the font of all knowledge at the WFA. If there's any information you need regarding to marketing, please do get in touch with Natalia and she will certainly be able to help you with whatever the nature of your request is. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, what is the WFA exactly? You know, you may be new to WFA, you may not be a member of the WFA yet. So what are we? Well, we are an association, we're a federation of 80 of the world's biggest brand owners. These brands here, many of the people on this call today. So we work for all of these companies here, and my role within the organization is to provide insight, support, and guidance to these companies. And the way we do this in many different ways actually. One of them is via client-only get-togethers, a little bit like this session here. This is from a meeting we conducted in Lego's nice new offices in London recently. And yeah, we see that there are a lot of value. Clients get value from hearing common solutions to common challenges. So that's why we do these sessions. And we began discussing digital transformation in meetings a little bit like this one not too long ago. And there are probably as many definitions of digital transformation as there are post-it notes to write on. However, we tend to hang our hat on this one here. It's actually from the Altimeter Group, a company based out of the US. They say that digital transformation is basically about more effectively engaging digital customers. That kind of works. It's maybe not the most elegant definition out there, but I think it kind of works. And if digital transformation is all about engaging digital customers, then of course social is very much at the heart of digital transformation, because what is social if it isn't about engaging people, engaging them in discussion? So for that reason, we have seen quite a lot of clients tinkering with the way they work with social, the organizational models that they have for social. And whereas in the past the centralized model was more common, we've seen a creep towards the hub and spoke, the so-called hub and spoke model, which is based on central coordination, but with others empowered to participate, the spokes, basically. So this has become a more common mode for social media organization. And for many, a natural progression and extension of that is to move into the social media command center or newsroom. So we wanted to know which of our clients, which of our members had these. So we asked this question in a recent survey. Does your business have a social command center? And if so, how is this structured? And 55% said, yes, we have one of these now on a global basis. And a further 26% said, no, but this is on the agenda for the future. So you've got about 80% of people who either have or plan to have a social media command center on a global basis. So that's quite a lot, right? There's no longer a niche thing. It's quite widespread now. But there will be people who support and people who detract from these. There are some core positives, I would say, that came through from this same survey. We have some people here saying that social media command centers are good because they provide a common vision, common guidelines, processes, and measurements. They enable us to become best-in-class, data-driven content producers, and that's quite interesting. We're seeing increasingly these social media command centers being a focal point for content, digital content production. What else? They enable more effective and fast consumer engagement. That makes perfect sense. But there are some people who aren't so keen. We have some comments here. Finding a balance between global and local is difficult with a command center. The resource, budget, and time required is too great. That does make sense. Obviously, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of work that goes into these centers, so I can understand that. The commitment required to be always on with content. Yes, of course, there would be a lot of work which goes into that. Although I might say that feels like more of an opportunity than a negative. But it's all food for thought, isn't it? So this was just a brief intro from me. I'm now just about to hand over to Anthony. Before I do, the only other thing to say, the bit of housekeeping, is that you'll see there is a Q&A widget probably towards the right hand side of your screen. Please do fire over questions to Anthony as the webinar starts and progresses. We'll reserve a few minutes at the end where we can direct these questions back to Anthony. So for now, I'm going to hand over to Anthony. Anthony, can you speak? Can you take control, please?
I can both speak and take control. Thank you very much, Matt. Okay. Well, hello everyone. I know we're all in different time zones. End of the day for some of us, beginning for others. I'm going to talk a bit about some of the things that I think are very interesting about Newsrooms. We've been working with Newsrooms at Brilliant Noise for the whole of the 5 years we've been around, and for about 5-6 years before that, in our previous agency where the management team came from. I think that there's lots and lots of reasons why newsrooms are interesting, but what I'm going to talk about today is some practical lessons from actually building these things, actually scaling them within global brand organizations, and also beyond the kind of practicals, some wider implications. So how I'm going to structure this talk, and I'm going to try and leave some time as well for questions at the end. I know there's always really interesting debate and discussion at WFA sessions. What I'm going to do is take you through some of the kind of overriding principles and lessons that we've seen about the recent development of newsrooms in many brands. We work with NBC, Universal, Tata Communications, Jaguar Land Rover, American Express. But I'm also going to talk about how those principles and lessons have been learned or practically applied at two of our clients, Adidas, who actually presented at a previous WFA session with me, Chris Ekman from Adidas, and American Express, where our client there has been kind enough to share a lot of their learnings publicly with their peers as well. So I'm going to move into the presentation now. So as I said, what I'm going to be talking about is both how they work and some of the challenges around scaling them beyond just a kind of campaign team of social media managers and content creators, and what their value is beyond, I would say, just digital marketing into the whole of marketing, and perhaps into the whole of organizations as well. And this is both interesting but also useful for marketers and advertisers, as it can help us to build the business case for investment in the resources that we do need to have always on content marketing, social media marketing as well. And I want to open with a quote. This is actually from one of my clients at American Express, Sarah Jones, who said that there are so many dots that people don't bother to connect them. And I kind of know what she means. What she was talking about was that there are so many different needs in a large brand organization, different products, different territories. American Express have 160 different territories that they do content or social marketing in, I think. And so many moving parts, different types of content, different parts of the customer journey, that it just feels dazzlingly complex, and we try to find simple solutions, and that sometimes we just carry on with business as usual, kind of a campaign mentality, or kind of using social media newsrooms, content newsrooms, a bit like old PR teams, which is important, but not the whole story. One of the things that we have to remember, I mean, digital marketing is effectively around 20 years old now. I mean, it's 2016. 1996, I was just starting my career, and we were talking about putting websites up for brands, talking about the beginnings of e-commerce. But 20 years on, we're still often seeing digital marketing as something that's changing very, very quickly. In some ways, it's quite immature when we compare it to traditional advertising or other parts of advertising, in that it can be very siloed, that there can be lots of different competing teams and interests, and it can be not very connected. And I think that newsrooms are quite interesting in coming up with some answers to those challenges. This is a book that I read recently, and it really made me think about newsrooms again. Digital marketing is Kylo Ren. Wow, yeah, that's interesting. I shall include that visual in my next presentation. Thank you, David. And this was a book by General Stanley McChrystal of the U.S. Army, who talks about teams of people working in very high stakes situation, having to be connected but also autonomous, and learning by doing. Outside of the military, we can see that in airline crews or in emergency room teams or Formula One pit stop teams. These are kind of the classic examples. Very, very fast. You cannot have top down. You need everybody to be cooperating, collaborating, moving very, very quickly, and also learning, crucially, learning and improving all of the time. So this concept of mission critical teams I found really resonant when I was thinking about newsrooms. And I felt that in marketing, and especially in digital marketing, perhaps newsrooms were the mission critical teams that we were looking for, as more and more marketing becomes real time, becomes very fast, becomes something where people need to be connected and autonomous, but we still got that desire for quality and control. And this is a kind of a structure of a newsroom in a fairly mature organisation that we see quite typically. There tends to be an editor-in-chief, but it isn't just creatively and editorially led. There needs to be somebody with a real operations mindset as well, somebody who can be thinking about how people are using technology, how things are executed very quickly, whether we have processes for learning and improving. And then we've got this amazing cross-discipline team by necessity in newsrooms, where we have not only strategy and planning, but we've got the creative people there as well. We need data insights people in those teams as well. We need people who are able to contribute with paid media support. It's really, really hard to think about content and digital marketing without some kind of paid support in there for distribution as well. So there's lots of different disciplines coming together in a newsroom. And in some newsrooms, as I'll talk about later, we're also seeing different product or marketing groups, different territory groups coming together in that newsroom. So it's not just a team, it's often a team of teams, as McChrystal would say. And I think that this is really, really interesting because it's a kind of a response to complexity, that fast changing landscape of digital, we talk about waves of change, waves of disruption, rather than a kind of a single wave called digital coming through. Means that we're dealing with a very, very complex environment where customer needs are changing very, very quickly, all sorts of pressures on us. It's a really, really important thing to acknowledge that. And if we think about, this is a quote from someone hilarious, that if we stop worrying about how to harness digital all the time, we might just get to ride the waves. We might just get to find out where the opportunities are and to use some of that energy and power to push the brand forward. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Adidas in a moment, but one of the things we do there is that we work on the technology and systems that run social at Adidas. It's quite interesting to me because we're a digital agency. A lot of us came from stories backgrounds, from creative or strategy backgrounds. And now we're obsessed with operations, and we're obsessed with the technology as well that underlies how newsrooms work. And there's good reasons for that. It's because without a focus on those things, there's operational aspects of how newsrooms work. We can't take things beyond being a campaign in a local area or a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter campaign that gets pushed out across the world and isn't as effective because either it tries to please everyone and therefore pleases no one, or it's too much biased towards one culture or another. So thinking about the technology and systems, the enablers, is very, very important. What we see is that a lot of the talk in digital tends to be about tech stacks, about tech solutions, and it's not often enough about people and processes and principles, what we call the the culture stack. And it's very beguiling. It's very tempting to think that the answer to these complex solutions lies in applying technology. And certainly when we talk to vendors or clients talk to vendors of systems to help newsrooms, the likes of Sprinkler, the likes of the social listening platforms, the likes of Percolate, etc. It's very tempting. Here is the solution. You buy it from us, you install it, and you are now enabled to scale and run content and social and customer experience at scale. But often when that's imposed upon the teams, the cultures that are there already, very little of that tool gets used. It's probably a statistic that many of you will have come across, but I think when social listening platforms became very important to marketing teams about 5 years ago, and they continue to be, if you talk to one of the vendors candidly, they'll probably tell you that actually for most of their installations, most of their multi-million-pound installation or multi-million-dollar installation of these services, people are only using about 10% of the functionality. And that's because teams haven't embraced the technology and got on board with it enough. And the challenge for this sort of non-adoption, non-use of the tech can be heightened by the fact that actually when we say we have a tech stack, it sounds very, very impressive, like it's intentional and shiny and structured, but actually it can be quite ad hoc. We can have different tools for planning, different ones for listening, different publishing tools, paid media tools that need to be integrated, different systems for evaluation. I couldn't agree more with Ranji David's comment there that principles is the one thing that people leave out. It's so important in social, absolutely. And may come to that a bit later on as well. But these tech stacks that we have, that we like to think have solved these problems about how we scale and how we run newsrooms, can actually be quite unstable. And I don't know if any of you have ever played the game Jenga with the wooden blocks that you pull out in a tower until somebody makes the tower fall over. But I sometimes think that the tech stacks that we see for digital marketing can be a little bit like tech Jenga. Which bit's going to go wrong, and what effect is that going to have on the rest of it? A picture of someone playing Jenga, just to illustrate that. So moving away from that kind of idea of digital Jenga to a more structured, holistic view of, okay, we know that cross-discipline, multifunctional teams in digital is the way forward with newsrooms. We know what the technology is, and we can think about, we need the purpose, principles as well, Ranji, processes, governance, and the right people on board with a common strategy and a common measurement framework as well. And that's what we're beginning to think of as content and social media operations, a kind of a sub-discipline of digital marketing. So newsroom-like teams can drive digital transformation in marketing and advertising, I believe. We see these newsrooms, they're often called things like command centers, war rooms, all these kind of military analogies that people sometimes like to use, slightly embarrassing, slightly awkward. Also called engagement centers, editorial hubs, content teams, social newsrooms, but we're always usually talking about the same thing, this cross-functional team, this connected team. And I like to think about it as a team that's highly networked, because it has to be. Often people are on loan or part-time in that team and sitting in other teams as well, so they're very networked within the organization, cross-discipline, real-time. And one of the things that I think is really crucial as a business advantage is they are very, very close to the customer. You go into a sophisticated newsroom, I think of the one that I visited recently at Adidas, and you've got community managers who are looking after their communities on Instagram, on Snapchat, on Facebook, Twitter, or they're looking after communities of customers, of fans around a given product like running or like or football, and they are really, really closely in touch with that community, what the tastes are, what's important to them at the time in that market. So they're very, very close to the customer. That's just another way of expressing that newsroom structure I was talking about. And yes, as I say, I hacked this together as a bit of a logo that I thought for newsrooms. When I went out and looked on the web for an icon or a logo to represent newsrooms in diagrams, in flow diagrams, in org charts, all I found were pictures of newspapers, megaphones, or sometimes a film camera or a video camera. That just doesn't feel like what modern brand newsrooms are. It feels too broadcast, too old school. What I think for me, this icon for newsrooms that I tend to use now it represents a network. It's a network within the organization, drawing different teams together, different territories together, and it's also plugging into the networks of customers as well. I think that networked aspect is one of the things that make newsrooms so interesting. One of the other ways that we think about the kind of imperative for newsrooms and why it's important to look at structuring them and making them work well is that really this is all driven by customers. It's not driven by a marketing opportunity, it's driven by necessity. Customers are more and more connected, they're more and more in charge of their own media use and consumption. If they want to see your ads, they'll see your ads. If they don't want to see it, they won't see it. They will share content. They will go and find what they need when they want it. So the communications, the marketing communications that we have, needs to look more networked, more like a newsroom, so that we're following them, so we're present in their networks, and we're able to get the right content to them at the right time. But I think that this can also have an effect on the wider organisation as well. I want to go on to talk about that a little bit. So we at Brilliant Noise have adapted a way of looking at how organisations are developing with newsrooms and with content and social and customer experience. We've developed a way adapted from a Forrester, the Analyst House model of looking at how brands are developing in digital. And really it's about thinking along two axes: is how good are we externally at developing creative content and great customer experiences? How sophisticated are we? And in order to support that and do that well, how well organized and structured are we internally? How good are our platforms? How good are our processes? How customer focused and flexible and agile is our culture to meet that? And we kind of look at three phases in that growing maturity. The first level is maybe the first time that we've actually got a newsroom or a cross-disciplinary team that is creating content and creative that's working in that cross-disciplined way that I mentioned in that diagram. The next level up, as people become more sophisticated about this, they tend to evolve into what we call an integrated customer communications model. This is what we see at brands like Nike, Adidas, and I believe Unilever as well, very strong on this front, and Philips. But integrated customer communications. So they have newsrooms, and these newsrooms are well connected into customer service, into the advertising side of the business. They're integrating and scaling across different territories in a consistent way. They don't just have either the hub and spoke where they're pushing out content and hoping people use it, or the everybody's just doing their own thing to some brand guidelines kind of scattergun approach. And the step beyond that we see as the kind of the logical evolution of this is where customer communications actually begins to connect in with every other part of the organization as well, and starts to affect how products are developed and how things are sold to people. I've just got a question here from Ranji David. Does integrated customer communications bring more of the customer service piece into it, and how would it differ from the next stage? Yes, that's a very good question. And yes, integrated customer communications is what we see there is that conversation with customer services, especially, starts to become more sophisticated. So in integrated customer communications, there's kind of good partnership with customer services. We'll hand over a tweet or a Facebook inquiry or an issue to customer service, and customer service will deal with it very well, or they'll have their own Twitter account that deals with that very well. In connected, the where we're seeing brands going in connected customer marketing is where actually there are going to be customer service people sitting in that team or connected and working on the same systems. We see people using Sprinkler or Percolate and integrating it with Salesforce and making it all part of one system. I'm going to go into a bit of detail which will hopefully bring this to life a little bit more for everyone. This is based on some of the things that Chris Ekman from Adidas was presenting, one of your peers, at the last meeting that we were at both together. Oh, another question from Randy David. What about bots? Do they come into the social newsroom piece? I think they do. I think they come in as part of customer service, but also as part of how you get the right content, the right information to the right customer at the right time. I really see bots as part of distribution, as kind of another platform or another way of getting that content to the right people at the right time. So Adidas, I think, are a fascinating organisation. We just work on a small part of their global newsroom work. We work with their what's their team now called Thread, which is all about the technology and systems that support global newsrooms. But it's a real privilege to work with them, just to see how the organisation is evolving and to visit their different newsrooms and see how they're working. I find them very inspiring. So after the story, as Chris tells it, is that after the Olympics and the last World Cup, the newsroom model for those sort of campaigns, as it were, worked very, very well. And so the company began to scale that, opening newsrooms now, I think, in around 10 cities around the world. And all of them work in the same way. They have that editor-in-chief kind of model, and all of those editor-in-chiefs collaborate. Each newsroom has community managers and strategists for different verticals that really focus on that area, and it's also part of their strategy of focusing on cities as these hubs that then influence culture more widely in a country and then a continent. And this is the story that Chris tells around the kind of how he's been there right since the start. He built their first Facebook page when he was working for Sidley, and then joined Adidas from there. Back in 2008, they had 150,000 followers on their Facebook pages and 3 accounts globally. And over time, they scaled that. 2011 was kind of the next phase, where they had in-house community managers and some technology called syncaps. And then they progressed to the sort of last year, I think they were around 175 million followers, 30 million engagements a month, 252 accounts, and trying to deal with the challenges of should they have fewer, should they have more accounts, what's the right technology to support all of the now 500 users across 9 to 10 newsrooms, and how is that going to evolve in 5 years' time. They can kind of see the direction of travel now, they can see the way that it needs to evolve, and doing really, really interesting work there. I think this is an interesting thing to share as well, because it shows the level of sophistication at Adidas. There isn't just a team that's doing this well, and that has been replicated across 10 territories. There's this commitment from the technologists in the company, this SPS team, which I think fits as part of the CIO's team rather than the CMO's team, but worked in very much like a social organization rather than as an IT department dictating how technology is used. Is they're trying to spot how these newsroom editors, creatives, data users are using technology, what they need to get stuff done, and supporting them by getting the right products, specifying those, providing them services to support, help desk and training, and then telling them about how to use your platforms. And this is a kind of another diagram showing quite a sophisticated, I really like this diagram because it shows quite a sophisticated content distribution mechanism, and it's not even their external one. This is Chris's team's diagram for how it manages its content to support its users who are working on the platforms. So it's how it does help desk, how it supplies support articles to people. Really, really interesting. And then another key thing that this team is doing is advising these people who are already quite expert, but bringing in kind of in-depth analysis of new platforms. I think Peach was fairly big for issue for a little while. I'm not sure where it's at the moment, but sort of showing like, look, here are the possibilities to work with your communities, and these are some of the risks, and this is why maybe we sit back and wait to see how this is going to evolve. Ranji asks, why is hours of advice a KPI? Is that compared to offline hours? What does this say about performance? Oh, that's okay. No, that just in terms of that was the charter of this team, thread team. It was what they were trying to measure was are they how much advice are they giving to people, because that can give them that's within the organisation, because that can help them to specify where they need more resource or more technology, or where they can automate the support process. One of the other jobs that they have is trying to help simplify things for the digital marketing teams, for the newsroom teams. These two images, one from Forrester and its SRP wave, showing the number of different vendors there for social relationship management platforms, for tech platforms to support social media and content. And then this diagram, which I'm sure many of you have seen before, of the marketing technology landscape that Chief Martech Officer puts up there, just showing the bewildering number of technologies out there. Now, that's something that someone needs to worry about, but definitely not everyone needs to worry about within that team. They need somebody who's able to make choices and filter what the choices are for the internal teams. So just drawing us back now to another case study. This one's quite a practical, straightforward account of change, of a situation at American Express with Newsrooms that was developed in an interesting way. And this was a framework which we developed with American Express to help analyze what were their strengths and weaknesses, and what their culture, their processes, their teams needed. And we called it the 6 Ps. And it was basically to take a look at their current editorial hubs, newsrooms content, and say, what's going on here? What's the purpose? And what are the principles? Back to your earlier point, Ranju. What are the principles that we're using to decide what's good content and what's good ways of behaving, and not what platforms are we using? Do we have the right processes, the right people? And are people using a current way of a consistent way of evaluating performance? And this is a really nice kind of what we call a back of a beer mat in England, a back of a beer mat audit that you can do on your team, or start asking questions around the organisation, and then you can get more technical and get into the detail and then analysis about it. But it's like, are we all clear on what the purpose is, and do we have all of these things in common, or do we have the right ones in place? And very often the answers are that we have the right platforms and we've got the right people, but actually we don't have common processes. We're not sure what the principles of what good content is and isn't. And again, harking back to Ranji's earlier question, these were some of the principles which American Express came up with for its editorial hub teams. I should add that the issue that American Express had here was that they had 160 countries, around 50 to 60 core that were getting content that was created centrally sent out to them, and a great deal of this content wasn't being used, and they wanted to understand how they could better organise and more efficiently create and distribute content. So rather than working with all of those, we took away 2 countries, Canada and the Netherlands, and ran a pilot to explore what might be a better way of organising these editorial hubs, these editorial newsrooms. So the principles, and I think these are really, really strong, these are the principles that American Express developed for how they all agree that they work on their newsrooms. First of all, they ask about any piece of content, what's in it for the customer? And I love this, because a lot of the time you can see content that's been developed that's obviously started from the point of view of what's in it for us. What do we want to say? And if you talk about what's in it for the customers, not only are you going to provide a better experience, you're basically going to have a better chance of people engaging with content and using it. And the other 2 that I'll just highlight, I won't go through every one, but I love this one that was only Amex can do this. And it was kind of a criteria for developing content that was, we're not going to just do more travel guides, or if we're sponsoring London Fashion Week, more catwalk show photos, because that's being taken care of by specialist media, by other brands. We're going to do stuff that only we have access to, something that belongs to our brand, and something that will excite the customers. And then just the principle of we're one team, and the idea of operating globally as a team. What they had as a challenge was that across different categories and different markets. They had very siloed models of creating content. American Express has been doing content effectively before digital for 100 years. It's been publishing books. It's been providing all sorts of content for a long time. So naturally, silos have emerged around different magazines, different types of content, different products. And this is how our client Sarah Jones there expressed it, was that we had lots of teams who were doing their own research, their own production, and their own measurement, and all of those things were different. So none of the measurement could be compared effectively across all of the different campaigns. So what we did was put a newsroom in the middle of it, and we created these kind of horizontal tiers where all of the teams came together to share insight, research, and themes, then to share the actual editorial creation and detail, and then share the same measurement frameworks and systems, which meant that they could still do their own things that were important to them, but that they didn't have as many scheduling clashes, that when stuff was created centrally, it would work more effectively locally. And this is another tool that we developed as a way of kind of helping people to understand what content was for, what its purpose was. We talked about the different things that it needed to do. So we had brand, theme, and objective. So brand was the brand pillars that needed to be talked about. The themes were the consumer interests, and the objectives were the parts of the customer journey that we were targeting. And so people could see like kind of a stamp on each piece of content or on each piece of the content plan and go, that's what that's for. Great. Just a couple of questions here. We've got principles seem to relate back quite heavily to the brand piece. Yes, absolutely. And a strong brand purpose and a strong idea of what the brand means to customers is really, really important for creating strong content. The Amex newsroom the central newsroom was based in London. This was their rest of world newsroom, so all of the territories in the world apart from the United States. Then there were local newsrooms or there were local social and content teams in each of those territories. Sometimes it's someone's part-time job in a smaller territory. Sometimes in a big territory like Canada, it would be dedicated people and dedicated agencies. So there was one central newsroom and then two local newsrooms that we were working with, and this was out into an organisation around 50, I think. Okay, and just one of the other things that they were able to do was then to start categorising their content and thinking about it in different ways. So campaign content, always on, evergreen, the purpose for it, and measure the return on investment, the effectiveness of each of those separately. And what's nice about this case study is that Amex were happy to share the results of this pilot. The pilot ran for 18 months, but the first 6 months, there was a massively fast turnaround in the territories where they'd applied this idea of having common purpose, principles, platforms, processes, where they'd invested in the operations and thought about how they could better serve the customer. And they went from what the pie chart on the left shows is a kind of 84% of content being created centrally wasn't used in the regions, and we flipped that round to 83% being used, which was a 500% increase. And at the same time, a natural side effect was because the content was being created more with the customer in mind and was more effectively planned for and used, that we'd kind of got the planning more transparent, more visible, and more focused. We saw a 200% rise in engagement as well with customers. And we've seen that again and again, actually, across different brands, that as soon as a process is introduced, it increases engagement. As soon as you take away the ad hoc nature of content production and planning, and give people a good structure that's based on customer insight, it immediately improves engagement. So I've talked for quite a while. Thank you very much for listening. But I think just the last point I'd like to make is that that I find newsrooms fascinating because of all these different types of value that they represent. I mean, they are absolutely the best way for global brands to be thinking about how they provide content and customer experience in digital to customers. And we're seeing that as a proven best practice now. But I think they're also, in a sense, the future of marketing. They're very, very close to the customer. They're very, very agile. They're learning quickly, and they're cross-disciplinary. I mean, if we hear one thing again and again when we work with clients, it's like we really want to kind of try and break down silos, and this is a great way to create a space between those silos and a way of connecting up organisations. And I also think that in the sense of that mission critical team, that the team that's learning, being very adaptive, sort of pulling in other teams rather than creating its own domain, it's a kind of an operational model which can be quite inspirational to the rest of organizations who are looking for digital transformation in every aspect of what they do. So that's the end of my section. I'm going to hand back to Matt now.
Thank you, Anthony. That was really interesting. I'm certainly sold. I think they sound like a fantastic principle. So, what would you say to the comment we started with was from a member which said that negative from his or her perspective was that social media command centers or newsrooms or whatever you want to call them, that they were the commitment was too great to be always on. I feel like this is actually an opportunity rather than a negative. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of things that you could be read into that, and actually that comment could mean a lot of things. But the commitment is too great really echoes that sentiment that Sarah Jones from Amex was saying in that quote at the beginning, which is sometimes there seem to be so many dots that we just can't be bothered to connect them. I mean, it's better to just go, do you know what? That's too much. And actually, it's just a complex operational challenge. If it's done right, if it's done in a structured way and the problems are thought through, then it will be much more efficient than the old way of doing things. So in creating an editorial hub at American Express, as we showed, we could be so much more efficient about the use of content. And what those figures did, that operational efficiency, if you like, what those figures did was allow us to build a business case in those first 6 months for further investment. And it was in the months after that that we were then able to prove the customer engagement and the kind of the marketing benefits of working in this way. But talking, if you can take what you're doing in a pilot around a newsroom and present it to a CMO, a CFO, a CIO, and go, this is why we're doing it, guys. 1, here's the customer. 2, it's massively more efficient. So it is challenging, but I think for most global brands, some form of newsroom approach is going to be best practice.
Yeah, sure. Okay, build a business case. That's good. Good idea. Now, if anyone else wants to ask questions, we obviously had quite a few throughout this session. Ranji's been firing them across. Anyone else want to ask them, please do just stick them in the chat or in the Q&A. I think the net effect is the same. Either way, put your questions over. But if there aren't any, that's fine. I've got a couple more to ask. So, Anthony, you spoke about the sort of operational side. How challenging is it to combine all the bits of technologies? You spoke about this sort of the stacks, and I get it. We've got a technology stack, we've got a culture stack, and they're both hard to sort of assemble and keep up if you're thinking about the Jenga analogy. But how difficult is it to combine the disparate bits of technology around the world across these different command centers? Is that difficult, or is that not so difficult?
It's difficult in that it's hard work. It's not difficult as in that once you have a strategy and you start cracking on with it and you say, look, this is how we're going to solve this, and we're going to do this by improving over time. Then it's very, very possible to do it. You just need the right people on the team. One of the things that I've learned as effectively somebody who's a communicator, a stories person, came from a communications background, is what I learned 5 years ago is I need to work with data people because I need that insight and that live data coming through, and I need to wrap my head around what that has to offer. I think what we've seen ourselves learning and our clients learning over the last 2 years is that you also need an operations mindset, and that isn't always present in a marketing team or certainly not in a digital social content team. So bringing in people who have a kind of an ability to design process, an ability to specify technology properly, and to have a sort of systems view of how this is going to work ongoing. Bringing in people with that sort of experience is really, really important. we tend to have a bias in our digital marketing teams and our towards either data and a campaign view or towards a creative view, and we kind of push that. What we need is somebody balancing us, not just around a project management view, but kind of a strategic operational point of view, and that's been really important to learn. So it's difficult, but if you've got the right people and the right strategy, most importantly, then it can be done.
Okay, that's good. That's interesting. And final question from me. It's been said that utilities such as Sprinkler and Percolate and Spreadfast, that they are rarely used to their full potential. Do you see any clients that are really maxing out what can be done with these applications, and what does this look like? What if you're using the full 100% of it, what kind of command center are you delivering then?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's a number of different sort of scenarios for how well or badly we see them being used. As context, it's important to understand that these systems and that tech landscape is changing very, very quickly. So for somebody who is leading marketing or leading digital marketing in this area, the important thing is to keep your eye on purpose and principles first and foremost. So look, this is what we are trying to do, and this is how we're trying to do it. Now, tech, okay, great. What I need is tech that's going to help us do these things more efficiently. And I also need processes to go with those that are actually being used by my team. Now, they're quite often underused because the tech solution is bought and the tech team or the marketing team that have gone through the procurement process just go, sigh of relief, here you go, let's get some onboarding training and off we go. And maybe the use or the effectiveness of the use isn't even being measured from that point on. It's like we've delivered the solution. Well, no, you haven't. You've delivered the tools with which the team will provide the solution. So what we see is quite often people using it well in one office or one team and not well in other ones because they haven't had the attention or the support to do that. Or we see consistently across the whole organisation, everyone using about 10% of them. Now, there's two different approaches to solve that. Conveniently, I think we can talk to both of the client case studies here about how those organisations have tackled it. Adidas has bought the solutions and then developed the support to make sure they're used properly. So it specified the best tech and then thought about how it can support people using those onboarding, getting the right support. American Express was the exact opposite. What they did there was go, okay, we need to think about how we want to design this new editorial hub way of doing things. And what we did was use that as a pilot prototype. So we used things like Google spreadsheets and free versions of tools and bits of tech here and there to get the process working well, and then used that to develop an RFP for the technology, to make the choice of the technology an outcome of the way that the team was working. So different approaches, but it is kind of a complex and fast-moving area as well. The important thing is keep your eye on the customer and keep the eye on your strategy more than on the technology. Don't let the MarTech tech landscape lead you. Organisations like I'll stop for a moment, but organisations like Sprinkler are fascinating, and so are Percolate, and they're kind of on a brilliant mission. But let them serve you rather than following their dream.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. All right, so a question here from Kyle. On the integration front, what's the view on marketing and corporate communication functions? Should they share operations and platforms or have their own?
Now, that's a lovely question, because I think when we're presented with that question and we're working with the client, there's quite a lot of, well, let's look at the organisation, understand how these two different teams work, what the functions are, etc., because they can be very different from one organisation to another. As a kind of academic question, generally, I think yes, they should both share the same operations and platforms, because as much as possible, you want either the platforms to be the same or integrated, because that will give you the best chance of providing a consistent customer experience, whether that customer is is coming across a press release or or something that corporate communications is managing, or a piece of promotional or use or customer support content, that they've got the same experience, that it's consistent, and that they don't feel they're confused by different messages and different tones of voice or even different information.
Great. Okay, and some others coming through. So we have a question here. How does the newsroom model work in China, especially around the tools and to connect the various parts of the newsroom in China? Any experience of that?
Newsrooms in China, I think that for companies in those territories, it's really no different. What the principles are exactly the same. The platforms may be different, and the platforms may be different, but that could be because of the territory, or it could be because of the customer or the segment that you're going after. For instance, I've talked a lot about Adidas and Amex here, who are both consumer brands, but we're also working with Tata Communications, where they're the place that people are going to go to find content there is going to be in quite technical forums quite often, in business forums, in closed networks. So we're looking at a different set of needs and a different set of external platforms, of spaces where customers are. So what the newsroom is looking at, where they're trying to reach customers, and also how they're organised around either product or customer segments will change from company to company. But the principles should remain the same in China or Singapore or Japan. And we see big differences between territories. It's really interesting. So I mean, one instance that I was surprised by when we were working in Japan was that whereas in the US, for one brand we were looking at, they would have around 40% of their social media engagements or their customer engagements would be to do with customer service. That could be complaints or inquiries. In Japan, that number was 0, because culturally in America, people like to talk about what they're doing. Culturally in Japan, it wasn't normal to be seen to complain, and you would do that through a private channel. So yes, it can differ, but it will differ because of the customer much more than the territory.
Okay, thank you for that. Anthony, one more question here from Ipshita. She's asked to add to Kyle's question, I think, in larger organizations, traditional PR and social teams are different. Should these be combined?
Yes, I believe they should, and either that they are the same team, or that they are that they share a newsroom. So again, I think the Adidas and the Amex models both speak to this, but that you will see PR as part of those teams. And I think at Adidas it was one of the founding teams. So this wasn't just people coming from an advertising or a digital marketing point of view. It was PR teams getting involved from the off. And I think that unless the audiences for corporate communications are hugely different, or PR is hugely different to the kind of main audiences that you're dealing with in a newsroom, and I'm thinking perhaps of where you're talking to shareholders quite specifically, rather than to general public or other stakeholders, that if PR and social are disconnected, you're going to miss opportunities to get the most out of them. So, for instance, in a newsroom, if you score a great article in Vogue, in a fashion brand, and you're in a social newsroom, then you'll know about that straight away, and people will make the most of it, and they'll talk about it in different areas. Where those two teams are disconnected, that advantage might be missed. It's a simple example.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Anthony. This has been fantastic. The last question we have is, how do we contact Brilliant Noise? Everyone left on the webinar, you can see Anthony's contact details are here. We'll share this deck, and we'll also share the recording in due course. So that's all from us. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. Thanks to Anthony for doing an interesting session. And stand by for the next webinar or live session in due course. Our CDO forum, our digital forum, meets next on 15th of June in Amsterdam, hosted by TomTom. Please do join us there if you can. So that's all. Thanks again, and see you next time.